I'm excited to talk to all of you right now, and I'm going to ask if all of you would please to share this with other individuals who may be interested in this particular um, topic. It's Brandon Lewis, and what we're going to be discussing is an important update on House Bill 10. And I'm going to tell you what I have discovered and experienced over the past, say, 24 hours, and you can make up your own mind based upon what you think. So I've got a very short period of time to do this. I'm in between calls as I run my other business, but this issue of getting our freedoms and liberties back in Tennessee, this issue of having a choice as it relates to vaccination and other elements is very important. So if you're concerned about these things in our state, I would recommend that you share this video with as many conservatives as you can. So we reported yesterday in a way that was pretty controversial, essentially stating that House Bill 10, which is primarily a bill about medical choice, was getting changed in the subcommittee structure. And there were two issues at hand. One of them was criminalization, and the other issue was compulsion. Now, the Republican caucus says that that is a mischaracterization, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I'm going to give you the details and you can make up your own mind. So, first off, criminalization. Under a present 1905 law, it is a Class C misdemeanor for a person to refuse to be vaccinated or prohibit another individual in that person's control to be vaccinated when an application is made by a health officer, board of health, or physician. And there's some other information that goes along with this. But it is an old 1905 law. And originally, as I understood it, and I would love clarification on this, House Bill 10 came wanting to strike that language, but some representatives wanted to keep that language. And the reason for keeping that language is, oh, it's old, it's outdated, that would never be enforced. Well, we've looked at a lot of these executive orders that have come out for the last 12 months, and we've watched people run roughshod over our liberties. And guess what? The power that allowed the governor and county mayors and health boards to do all these shenanigans came from old, outdated codes that, guess what? Nobody was ever going to use because they're just old, outdated codes, right? Nobody's ever going to use that. Well, apparently they do use old, outdated codes, and we're trying to put in legislation in various ways now that that change that. There's the second issue of compulsion, and you read the headline, you think compulsion. There's no compulsion here. Well, there was, as HB 10 came in, to my understanding, it would not allow for employers to require certain medical procedures or vaccinations of employees, meaning that as an employer, you can't say, hey, if you're going to work here, you've got to have this thing injected, you've got to have this thing cut off, you've got to do this medical treatment. In order to work here, you have to have some sort of medical treatment against your will. And you may say, well, that's not compulsion. But how many of you know of someone who works at a hospital or who works in an environment where they're not really putting anybody at risk, but they load them up with these vaccinations unnecessarily against their will? Or, for example, if you say, if you're going to work here at XYZ Cube Company, one of these large buildings where there's 1,000 of administrative people and they're all in close proximity, and you say, well, we're going to make you get vaccinated in order to work here. It's a requisite of requirement or of employment. Well, that's a big issue. Now, those are our two biggest issues. Okay. There were people wanting to amend and change this bill as it was presented to our understanding that would not get rid of that criminalization verbiage in the code, even though it's old, and that wanted to leave the door open for some types of mandatory vaccination in employment situations. We are against that. So we reached out to Robin Smith at 6:03 a.m. the day that this story was breaking and never got a reply. Well, it's breaking news. I can't report this stuff after someone votes on it. It's of no use to you as the reader. We have to we have to get the news out as the news is breaking, right? And we didn't hear back, and so we had to run with it. And so instead of addressing concerns from the caucus that grassroots constituents and conservative voters have, which is about compulsion and about criminalization, even if it is an old 1905 code, what we got were these typical full of platitude responses, which are we're for people and we're for choice and we've never said this and saying that's a mischaracterization. I worked in campaigns for years and I have been paid to put together that gobbledygook that sounds really good but means absolutely nothing. Okay, I've been paid to do it for years. I can write it today. If I had to write a bunch of gobbledygook that would make you feel better but not tell you anything, I could do it. Okay, it's not very hard. If instead of sending those platitudes, they would have simply said, here is where we stand on the criminalization and what we think the committee will do. Here's where we stand right now on compulsion in employment situations for vaccination. It would be so easy and there could be an open dialogue. Instead of it being about policy, it ended up being about personality. Well, we don't live under personality, we live under policy. And so all of this could have been clarified easily if someone would have just communicated clearly about the specific elements in the bill instead of acting as if somebody had, you know, told a real bad your mama joke in seventh grade, right? We're all adults here. This is about policy. So if people will just plainly communicate about policy, we can get the news out to our readers in a way that is helpful. So Republicans, I think, have to understand um, the present political environment, and that is conservatives have watched their liberties be completely dismantled and ran over for 12 months now without a whole lot to show for it. Businesses have been shut down, schools have been shut down, kids are behind, mental health is in a bad situation, and it was all avoidable, much of it. And right now, when people are wanting to screw around with freedoms and wanting to continue to restrict and play around with and compel people or whatever, I mean, conservatives and Republicans who vote in primaries right now are very sensitive to all that because after 12 months of watching the state legislature sit on its hands while Governor Lee just did whatever he wanted to, and without calling a special session or putting up a fight, a lot of people are very dubious, are very they're very skeptical about the intentions of a lot of this legislation as well they should be. I mean, you if you beat a kid up for about 12 months and you come into the room and maybe somebody else is singing a different tune, but when the government's been oppressing you and has been constricting you for 12 months, and then somebody else from the government comes in and says, we're here to help, people are gun shy. And that's the environment we're in right now. So finally, the other thing that worries me, and I used to raise money for a living and wrote a book on it, how to raise money for political office. There are a lot of people on the subcommittee, and it's not uncommon, and it doesn't mean that you're a bad person, who have taken tens of thousands and maybe in their career hundreds of thousands of dollars from very large corporate employers who would love nothing more than to be able to mandate vaccines and all other kinds of treatments to their employees as a condition of employment. We see it all over the nation. So to think that that's not a thing is crazy. The second thing is they get lots of money from people in the medical community, PACs, lobbyists, people that are on boards of PACs, and there's a lot of money being made in vaccines right now. There's a lot of money being made in the distribution of them, of the selling of them, and when something gets mandated, you get to sell more of it. And so there's an enormous monetary pressure being placed on legislators right now to do what their constituents frankly don't want. And some of them are going to try to go along with it. And when you do that, you know, your constituents, if they catch wind of it, are going to be upset. And that's part of politics. It's not personal, it's policy. And when you have a corporate entity that wants one policy and your voters that want another policy, there's going to be conflict, right? And I think the easiest way as Republicans and conservatives in both media and in government that we can resolve those things is simply to have a conversation, not about platitudes and press release statements, but about the policy so that readers can know what's really being discussed because it's very confusing and it happens very fast and a lot of it happens in a way that's very obscure and it probably shouldn't be as obscure as it is. It should probably be more open and transparent in committees. And if you didn't have to get all this he said, she said stuff, a lot of this reporting could be a lot easier. And maybe they'll move toward that at some point in the future. But for right now, if you like what we're doing, following these stories and reporting them when no other outlet reports on them, I look for news about this in our local paper and all over the state. I could not find any of it, although people are obviously very interested in it. If this is the type of thing that really makes a difference to you, I would recommend that you go to TennesseeConservativeNews.com and subscribe. And if you can help us, click the support button, give a donation of any size, and we'll send you a couple of proud Tennessee conservative bumper stickers and a thank you letter. It's not a lot, but it's our way of saying thanks because we are really looking out for conservatives by policing conservative policy and making sure that Republicans really live up to the standards when we send them to office, when we vote for them in the primaries, that they really do carry out those conservative policies. So I'm Brandon Lewis with the Tennessee Conservative News. I hope this clarifies some things, and I hope that the caucus and a lot of these representatives who have sent these very general statements would send me something very specific about criminalization, okay, the 1905 criminalization code, and educate me on it. I'm happy to be educated. And the second thing is compulsion, and that is compelling people that are in employment situations to get vaccines. Is that legal? Is it not legal? Can an employer do that? And we're hoping both of those things get clarified in House Bill 10. And we don't have any animosity. We just want answers. Brandon Lewis with Tennessee Conservative News. I'll talk to you next time.